Welcome to Season 2, Episode 4, Behind the Underdogs. In this episode, we are covering pages 145 to 189. Three things you will never hear me talk about in a good way: inner drive, passion, whether the glass is half full or half empty. You know what they all have in common? They all translate into, I thought about it and I did nothing. What the hell is inner drive? Inner drive is nothing more than thought without action. Internal wanderings that never hit the pavement to go anywhere. Completely worthless until those thoughts become external and convert to action. What good is the drive on the inside? Where are the results? People who preach inner drive are dreamers with a lot of ideas and a lot of talk and zero production. They tell you everything they're going to do and then they do nothing. That's inner drive. Let's move on. Passion, a strong feeling or emotion for something or someone. Very nice. Now what? Are you just feeling it, or are you going to do something about it? I love hearing motivational speakers tell people to follow your passion. Follow it? How about work at it? Excel at it. Demand to be the best at it. Follow it? But my favorite, the timeless debate over whether some invisible glass is half full or half empty. This is a concept invented by someone suffering from the complete inability to make decisions. Half full or half empty? You have something in the glass or you don't. If you like what's there, add more. If you don't, pour it out and start over. Otherwise, you're just staring at this non-existent glass thinking, damn, there's no way to decide. Bullshit. Of course there's a way to decide. You just don't want to commit to a decision. As soon as someone starts with half full, half empty analysis, you know you're in for a long debate about nothing with someone who can't or won't make a choice. To me, it's the equivalent of a guy standing in the middle of a busy intersection crying, I don't know, while everyone around him screams, get out of the street. Trust yourself. Decide. Every minute, every hour, every day that you sit around trying to figure out what to do, someone else is already doing it. So he starts off right away here with decision making. And we actually just recently did an episode on decision making, episode 18. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think everybody's going to struggle with it at some point, making difficult decisions. And pretty much he preaches this whole chapter about how he knows that there are decisions that need to be made and being patient with your decision and making the right choice. But, you know, typically the first gut instinct that you have on your decision is the right one. And it's the one that you end up choosing anyways.
And I think when he gets game related to like any sort of decision you need to make in a game, pass, shoot, make this play, whatever it may be, it's all on instinct. And everything he does is to train you. Everything he does in his training with you is to just give you the tools so you can act in whatever fashion, do whatever you need to do. It's all based on instinct.
Yeah. And he comes back to the same concept of don't think. So we've come back to this concept multiple times, and it's a chapter earlier on in the book, but he returns to it often in his examples. And the next thing he talks about is worrying about what others think of your decision making. So there's always going to be inputs from other people, external factors, and they do get in the way. And you don't realize they get in the way until they've made the decision for you. So I'm going to go back to the book here and read this. Most people don't want to make decisions. They make suggestions and they wait to see what everyone else thinks so they can say, it was just a suggestion. They know the right answer but can't act because if something goes wrong, they'll have to take the responsibility and then they can't blame anyone else. Meanwhile, someone else is going to make a decision, and when it works, he's going to get all the credit. And maybe the choice he made isn't one that works for everyone but him. But since no one else took charge, too bad for everyone else. So those are the go-getters, like, people who are quick to make their decisions and they're not worrying about what others think. Like, those are the guys who end up succeeding. And his examples that he goes on with a little further ahead here are the cleaners who, he talks about it a lot, where the cleaners, they don't worry about their teammates. They have one goal and they're going to use you to reach their goal. And in the end, that goal is what your teammates want as well, but you're setting them up. You know what I mean? Like, you're setting them up for success. And it might not seem like that. Like, he talks in here about being an asshole and how most cleaners, they're an asshole. But if you're not doing the right thing in terms of your mindset and being relentless, right? You're not going out with your teammates constantly and partying and all this shit. You're in the gym, you're training, you're watching film, all the stuff that actually gets you to that end goal. And ultimately, in the end, that gives you the respect from your teammates, coaches, whatever it is. Colin?
I was just going to say the other thing. I think it correlates to the glass half full, half empty concept as well. Because if you're a cleaner, right, you're not going to look at it like, okay, this glass is half full or half empty. It's either, like Rover said, there's something in there, and we're going to go and we're going to work towards this thing, and we're not going to let ourselves fail, and we're going to take full responsibility, or there's nothing in there, and we're going to move on. You know, if you're taking suggestions from other people and you're trying to neglect responsibility upon yourself, right, that probably means that you're not working at it as hard as you can because you know you're hesitant and you know there's a chance you could fail at it. So I think that the idea of going and getting what you want and doing it as hard as you can, whether, you know, and having high confidence that you're going to succeed at it, that is highly correlated with not taking suggestions from other people and having full responsibility within yourself as well.
Now, I understand what he's trying to say about, you know, like I said, right off the bat, he comes out with this inner drive, passion, and he just completely knocks it. But I think all those things contribute to the relentless nature of succeeding at something that you set out to do, right? Like, you don't have passion, you're not going to get to that end goal. You don't have an inner drive, you're not going to get there either, you know? Like, a lot of things are inside those categories: discipline, perseverance, like facing the adversity, like all those things come into play. I think I understand what he's trying to say, and it does make sense in what he's saying, but I wouldn't completely knock those attributes, right? And he goes on here. He drops some comedy in these chapters here. He goes on to say, "I'll give credit to the coolers for this. They have the flexibility and willingness to rethink their decisions and change directions if you give them a reason. A cleaner will just tell you to fuck off. You can waste a lifetime sitting around overthinking possible ways to look at something on one hand, but on the other hand, but then on this hand, stop it. You only have two hands, and that's already too many." It's a funny analogy, and it makes total sense. And once again, he's just so blunt with what a cleaner actually is, and a cleaner is blunt, right? There's one way to do it. There's one way to get there, and he's going to get there regardless of what others think, what others do, how others want him to act. Yeah.
I will say the one part that surprised me, now that's the exact kind of reputation that he seems to give off about cleaners is, they don't care about your feelings. They don't care about friends. They don't care about going out, none of that. But one thing I was a little surprised about, and now this is later in the book, but I'll touch on it now since it ties in, is when he talks about the interaction with the fans. Get out of your car in plain sight, sign autographs for 30 seconds, take some pictures, smile, da, 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 da. And I was like, that I wasn't expecting that. I expected him to be like, you're not engaged with the fans at all. They're just a distraction. You need to be in the zone. But no, he was all for the fans. Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's good. I like that.
Now, we should definitely talk about this, and we'll just jump ahead right now, and then we'll go back. I'm going to read this, what you're talking about, earning respect from the fans, and then we'll chat about it, and then we'll go back to where we were. Back to the book. "And while his performance on the court would certainly have been enough to earn him the kind of respect others could only dream of, the real performance started early in the day and didn't end until he was back in the privacy of his home. He made sure the game tickets were organized so he knew where everyone was sitting. He knew what his sponsors needed from him and whom he was supposed to see before and after the game. He paid attention to every single detail, from the tie he chose that day to the way his watch bands matched his shoes. He didn't wear a watch. He wore a timepiece. He didn't drive a mere car. He drove an automobile. And he wouldn't get behind the wheel of any vehicle that hadn't just been washed, even when it was raining. The car had to be perfectly clean. Why did he care? Because he knew those crowds around the stadium were packed with people who could never afford a ticket to see him, and this was their one chance, standing outside in the parking lot, to catch a glimpse. For most of his fans, that was as close as they were ever going to get. He was the only player allowed to pull his car directly inside the United Center, but he rarely did. He'd always stop first and get out of the car in plain view of the fans so all those people could see him. And he maintained that cool composure long after the game, win or lose. until he was back behind closed doors at home or in his hotel room where he was free to finally stop and relax. That's when the show ended. So I understand what you're saying, and I was thinking the same exact thing. And the line that kind of struck me the most was when he was talking about all those particulars, like wearing a timepiece, not a watch. He didn't, he has to get his car washed, before every game. And now those are like superstitions, maybe even, but like those seem like
All about,
distractions.
yeah, that I don't think that is. I think that's he cares about everything about him is professional. You drive a clean car,
Yeah,
you wear a
yeah,
nice suit. Like I think that's about being a professional 24/7. That I understand. The part that surprised me was when he's like, he knows where sponsors sit, he knows who he
yeah,
needs to
yeah,
see
yeah,
before, he
yeah.
knows where everyone was sitting. I was like, he knows where
That seems like
fans
being
are in the
out of
stand.
the zone.
Yeah, like to me, I thought he was like, for sure thought he would say that, yeah, Jordan's not concerned at all who's in the stands. His mom and dad could
Exactly.
be in the stands, or whatever, the freaking president could come and watch him. He doesn't care, like I don't know, it could be whoever. But I guess I was wrong.
He does contradict himself a few times. This isn't the first time, obviously a different um, area, but he does contradict himself a lot, and we have talked about it. But he goes on to say and says, that's how you earn respect. Excellent in everything.
Hmm. Which I,
That's
I
completely,
understand.
yeah, but that completely contradicts what he said. If that's like and he mentions a story about Kobe as well, about, pretty much if you're a jack of all, you're a master of none.
Hmm.
And this is being a jack of all, right? Excellence in everything. There's no such thing as
Yeah.
excellence in everything. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's true. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, he's excellence and everything. But he says, oh, he's giving the example about a guy working on the 1955 Maserati and doing this and that and
Yep.
working with a sushi chef and blah, 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 blah. But he's good at nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes on and gives more examples about dressing properly and all this stuff. So I'm going to go back to the book and read this. Another unnamed player that he was working with. Back to the book. One year, I was working with a player going to the finals, and I was waiting for him in the lobby of the team hotel so we could head to the arena. I'm watching all these players walk out to the bus, and each one looks sloppier than the next. I couldn't believe it. Is this the NBA Finals, or are we heading out to rob a liquor store? If Michael had been on that team, he would have pulled every guy off the bus and told him not to come back without a suit and tie. You don't need a $3,000 suit. Go to Walmart and buy three for $100, but come back looking like a man, not a kid who got kicked out of school. And then my guy comes down in the elevator and he looks worse than anyone else. This is the star of the team, a so-called role model, and he's dressed as if he were going to wash the car. I hustle him into a corner away from the media and lay into him. This is the finals. This is what you've worked for. You're on the biggest stage where everyone is watching, fans, sponsors, media. This is the ultimate showcase to represent yourself. Everything you do here is a reflection on you. What the hell are you thinking? And it makes sense. It really does. I mean, we've seen it all the time. Like it happens in more than just basketball too, but you're like, look at somebody and they're like a professional athlete and they look like a thug or something like that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like wear a suit to the game. Like you have to be a professional. So I do understand what he's talking about where Michael gets out of the car and like people went to see Jordan. They went to
Mm-hmm.
see Bulls games because of Jordan, because Jordan was there. And they're like, I got to witness this. I got to watch him play a game. People in, 30 years aren't going to be able to say that.
Yeah.
So like, I understand that where he's giving them the respect. Like they're here to watch me. I need to give them their best experience. So I understand that point of view. But, I understand what we were talking about earlier about the whole distractions and being in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go back to where we were in trusting instincts, not overthinking. And I know we're jumping around here, but let's go right back. We're on page 148. If you're ready for anything, you're not thinking about whether it's a good situation or a bad situation. You're looking at the whole picture. And if you're thinking about it, you're out of the zone, distracted and wasting energy and emotion instead of focusing only on what you have to do. Thinking doesn't achieve outcomes, only action does. Prepare yourself with everything you'll need to succeed, then act. You don't need 100 people to back you up and be your safety net. Your preparation and your instincts are your safety net. And this right here distracted and wasting energy and emotion instead of focusing only on what you have to do. Like right before this, he gives an example of distractions, knowing where everyone's sitting, knowing where your sponsors are, your media are, what you're doing before and after the game. Like, as we know as athletes, like if it's game day, it's game day. You're focused on the game and only the game, right? You have your routine for the game. Like nothing else matters that day besides the things that are going to prepare you for the game and make you perform for that game. So it could be a part of his routine, right? Like every athlete has a routine. And it's hard to kind of change someone's perspective on what's going to prepare them most for the game. I know, like, especially for me, like if my parents were going to come watch a game, I knew where they were before the game started. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, they're here, they're there, they're going to stay there. So I knew they were there. Like they're supporting me. That's an important thing to have a support system, I think. And in a situation like this, I don't know if he mentions family, but knowing where people, he generalizes, he just says people. I'm assuming that might be, family, friends, or whatever it is, but that could be a good support system for him. Go ahead, Colin.
That's how I sort of looked at how he was approaching this, how he had his athletes approach this situation. Was you don't want to be spending obviously any mental energy thinking about this during the game. And so take that time before the game and kind of get some of that off the court or off the, whatever it is, off the field stuff that could be distracting you during the game out before the game even happens. Find your sponsors on the court, know where your parents are, spend some time with the fans and sort of get that out of the way so that when game time comes around, you're locked the fuck in and you're not thinking about that at all. Cause I know for me too, I do the same thing, Joey. Like if I'm at a game, like I want to know, okay, my friends are here, my parents are here, just know where they are and know your support system. It's in the back of your head. Okay, they're at this game and now it's time to go walk in and perform,
Yeah. And that way, once you get there, right, you're on the field, you're in the arena, whatever it is, and you get out there to start performing, you're set, you're comfortable, you're ready to go. And that ties into the concept of don't overthink, right? Like once you start thinking, if you're like, fuck, they're like people here, like, is my family here? Are they watching me? Are they supporting me? Where are they? You know what I mean? And he goes on and he says, as soon as you allow yourself to start overthinking your decisions, you start saying things like, I'll sleep on it, or let's put it on the back burner, or any one of the stupid cliches that mean I don't trust myself to make a decision. Back burner, the back burner is for cooling things. You've just cooled a hot idea, and then you'll forget about it altogether and quit, never knowing how close you might have been to success. So that ties in, like I said earlier, to our episode on decision making. That's a perfect example of external factors getting in the way. It's easier said than done, decision making, especially when there's not a clear goal or action in place for that exact moment. There might be two ways to get to where you want to go, and deciding which way you want to go it can be hard, right? And it's, Dylan, we've talked about this for hockey, right? You're figuring out where you're going to go for high school to play. And then once you're done with high school, you're like, okay, which junior route am I going to go? Or am I going to play in Canada? Am I going to play in the US? And then from there, it's okay. Am I going to play college, or am I good enough to sign pro or something like that? You know what I mean? And those are decisions that they're hard. They might take longer than a split second. But a cleaner, he talks about, is the gut instinct, right? Right away, what the answer is, but you give in to the concept of the other ideas, pleasing other people, and whether it's family, whether it's your agent, whoever it is, and it can get really hard. So he goes on about decisions adding up over time. He says, you can't wait. The decision you don't make on Monday will still be waiting for you on Tuesday. And by then, 2 new decisions will have to be dealt with. And if you still don't make those decisions, you'll have 3 more on Wednesday. Pretty soon, you're so overwhelmed by everything you still haven't dealt with that you become completely paralyzed and can't do anything. Meanwhile, as you sit back doing nothing because you're afraid to make a mistake, someone else is out there making all kinds of mistakes, learning from them and getting to where you want to be, and probably laughing at your weakness. And when you do finally force yourself to make a decision, what do you choose? Almost always, you go back to your first reaction, the first thing you thought of when the whole process began. You already knew. Why didn't you just trust yourself the first time? Now, gut instinct it's a hard thing to realize, right? A lot of people don't realize it until you're wiser, right? That's one of the biggest things about when you're getting older, right? Once you get older, it's easier to make a decision because you've been there, you've done that, you know what's going to be right. So the whole process is in learning what is right for you, and then your decisions become, they're quicker. They get quicker every time, generally speaking, depending on how big decision might be. And he comes up with an analogy on the next page. He says, you make a choice and stand by it. Most people can't do that. They're content to wing it or see what happens. Come on, you already know what's going to happen if you go into it that way. Whatever you started is going to fall apart. But that's what most people do. They test the waters before jumping in. Why? Unless you suspect those waters are churning with crocodiles, what's the worst thing that can happen if you take the plunge? You get wet. A cleaner thinks, no problem, I'll swim. Most people just stand at the edge shivering and looking for a towel. Oh, you can't swim? Fine, then tell me what you can do. Why stand at the water's edge feeling sorry for yourself? Go a different way. Excel in another area while everyone else is just competing for space in the same pool. You don't become unstoppable by following the crowd. You get there by doing something better than anyone else can do it and proving every day why you're the best at what you do. You must know someone like this. He can do everything. This week, he's a blogger and a songwriter and a motivator. Last week, he was teaching tennis 2 nights a week and working as a sushi chef. And on the weekends, he's rebuilding a 1955 Maserati. You listen to him and feel as if you've never done a thing in your life until you listen more closely and discover that, like a lot of people, this is someone dabbling in a lot of things and succeeding at none. I listen to those people and think, as far as I can tell, the only thing you're good at is keeping busy. I want to hear someone say, I do this. Ask Kobe what he does, and he says, I give out numbers. Numbers? Yep. I gave them 81. I gave them a triple-double. I gave those guys 61. People love to comment on how he doesn't pass enough, but his job is to score points and give out those numbers, and that's what he does. So this is what I was talking about being a jack of all is a master of none. So all those side things that'd be cool. That'd be cool to do. That's a distraction from plan A. So that's the whole concept of backing yourself into a corner, right? Giving yourself no option but to succeed with that one goal that you have in mind, had in mind, or plan to have in mind. Yeah. Can go on here to, he then goes on to talk about an FBI agent, and Grover actually takes Jordan to the training facility that this guy's at. So I'm going to go on here back to the book. Years ago, I went with Michael to an FBI training facility where there's a practice range for the most elite sharpshooters in the world. There's one guy out there alone practicing his craft over and over. The target is 400 yards away, 4 football fields. He has to get in his truck, drive to the target, set it up, and drive back to where we're standing. He gets his gun with the scope, takes aim, one shot, boom. We didn't even hear it go. Then we get in the truck with him and drive back to the target. Hit it dead fucking center. We would have been impressed if he'd hit the target anywhere. 400 yards, dead center. Michael asked him how many people use that target range. He said, just me. So unless he had visitors like us, which didn't happen too often, he was alone working this one shot over and over. So when people in the military need someone who can hit that kind of target, they call him. No one knows what this guy does every day to be this good. People just know he can deliver results. Figure out what you do, then do it, and do it better than anyone else. And that's a consistency aspect. So like practicing what you preach, right? You have to practice over and over and over again. What if this guy gets called, right? And he's not practicing that same shot every day. He gets called in for a mission and he misses. Do you know what I mean? Like they're expecting you to, see you later. On to the next guy. Yeah. So it's, and that completely correlates with sports, right? And it's a cutthroat. If there's a cutthroat business, it's the hockey industry, right? If you're not performing, see you later.
I mean, look at your average junior hockey team. Like maybe the Gens aren't an average junior hockey team, but we went through like 58 guys this year.
Yeah.
You have one bad game. See you later. Half the team's out of COVID. Okay, here's your one shot. You sucked this weekend. Never coming back. Like,
yeah. I mean, I'll use me as an example. I'm not afraid to like tell my story about this year. Like, I wasn't having the best start to the season. We were 10 games in or something like that. And there was a goalie who was playing better than me. Not to mention, I'm a returning goalie. And there's someone who comes in. He's a stud. He's tearing it up. Who do you think they're going to run? But nobody gives a shit about loyalty. If you're not performing, it doesn't matter who you are, you're gone. You're gone like the wind, right? And it happens at every level nowadays, and it's getting younger and younger every year, right? I mean, eventually there's not even gonna be those contracts when you're younger playing at the U14 level or anything like that, where they're like, yeah, you're on the team, but we'll just sit you on the bench or something like that. Like, there's going to be a time where you get cut and you can't play on the team anymore. It just gets more and more competitive every year in every sport, right? There's athletes out there. So how are you going to distinguish yourself from everybody else? And it's not an easy thing to do. You have to have your one thing that they're like, we can't be without this guy because he has this. You know what I mean? So in this case, it's like, he's particular to basketball. And like I've said before, I love that he's just particular to that one thing because he's practicing what he preaches, right? He's trained these guys. He knows everything on every level. And he mentions it a few times. He's like, hundreds of thousands of hours of watching basketball. And it's just, he's like, it's hard to see how you can make it in the NBA if you don't have your thing, right? Your one thing. And this is Kobe's here. Like, he's a point getter, right? He's scoring, he's shooting threes, right? And then another guy might see that and try to do that, but he can't do it because he's not Kobe, right? He's got to stick to his thing. And it's it's a hard thing to grasp for a lot of people, and that's what I mean by, riding your wave, not riding someone else's. And it's definitely easier said than done. But now he goes on to talk
just
about
real quick.
here. Yeah, go
One
ahead.
thing I would say, just adding on to what you said about the replaceability aspect, and obviously being a cutthroat business, whether it's business, sports, whatever it is that your field is, just versatility and making yourself valuable in different ways. That's a good way to keep yourself, kind of alive in these industries. Like, you look at maybe a backup quarterback in the NFL, for example, might not be the most talented guy in the world, but finds ways to add value to the team in other ways, always being available, knowing the playbook inside and out, being a good locker room guy. Those are things that it takes zero talent to show up to work every single day, be on
decision.
Time. It's a decision. Exactly. And it doesn't take any talent. And you can add value that way. And there's no excuses to not excel in those areas, no matter what your field of interest is.
And so, like, as you were saying, like, there's a spot for everybody. In hockey, there's there's your talent guy, right? He only scores goals. And then you have your locker room guy. You even have your freaking water boys, right? They're good at being a scratch for that game or that weekend, whatever it is. But it's all about, knowing what you're good at. And he talks about all these different types of decision making. He goes on here and talks about injuries, and it's something that we talk about a lot, right? So he says one of the hardest decisions for an athlete is to determine how much fatigue and pain he can endure and how far he can push himself. So back to the book here. When some guys get injured and the doctor tells them they can't work out, they're fine with that. It's a relief and they don't miss it. When a cleaner gets injured, he's going to find a way to work out or go crazy trying. You have to make a choice. You can listen to the doctor and have a safer, longer recovery, or you can take the shorter route, a quick fix. Maybe not long-term quality, but you'll be able to play. Depends how badly you want it. So if you're an athlete, and now this is a telltale sign that you're just not in it for the game anymore. If you're playing, right, and you get injured and you're just like not trying to find a way to do something to get back out there or train in the gym a certain way to go around your injury, and you're just kind of like sitting back and relaxing and just enjoying that injury, you're praying for an injury. I can't tell you how many guys I've heard in junior hockey saying like, I actually don't mind, being injured right now. Like, it's not it's something that every athlete's going to go through, but every athlete handles differently. And that determines like where you end up, right? If you're eager to get back out there, yeah, you know, you might not be 100%, but it's that whole mind game, right? That whole mind process that every athlete has to go through. And the ones that are the toughest mentally are the ones who perform the greatest physically. And he talks about
Joe, just add on to that too. Like I had the same experience, like when I was obviously in college football and with the whole COVID-19 situation, we had a couple of outbreaks, and I remember there were a couple times where there were athletes who were like literally going out like trying to get COVID so that they didn't have to practice or work out. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, what the fuck are you doing playing college sports if you're not enjoying the work you're putting in? Like I just felt like saying that, you know what I mean? It just shocks me that there are people like that. And if that ever crosses your mind, you know, it's time to hang it up because you're not going to be successful.
Yeah. It's also harder at, you know, a different level of the sport, right? You know, at the D1 level or the pro level, like you're going to see more of the guys trying to reach the same goal. But, you know, you go lower down, whether it's D3 or even juniors, because there are plenty of junior hockey players who have no they have aspiration, but not the aspiration that we're talking about to play in college hockey. Some of them are just there to just play hockey and drink and do all that stuff. You know what I mean? Some of them
live
just
the hockey
might have
player
the
lifestyle.
talent. Yeah, and they just by coincidence have the talent to play at that level, but they're not going to have that same talent at the next level because that's where all the driven athletes are. And, you know, granted, there are a few people who, you know, they don't end up playing D1 or pro or whatever it is for, you know, a variety of reasons. But anyway, so he goes on and he talks about Jordan's, the famous flu, Michael's famous flu. So back to the book. I think most people recognize by now that he probably didn't actually have the flu that night in Utah. More likely it was food poisoning. Shortly becoming ill, he'd ordered in a late night dinner from the only place we could find open in Park City. And when 6 guys showed up to deliver it, I felt something was wrong. Soon after, he was curled up on the floor, miserable and shaking and sicker than I had ever seen him. Yet he had the grit and determination to play the next night, scoring 38 in what would become one of the defining games of his career. Probably the most difficult thing I've ever done, he said. Amazing what someone can do when everything is on the line. I mean, that's being in the zone right there, right? That's a distraction. Being sick like that, having to block that out and just stick to your game. That's a decision, right? You have to make that split-second decision to continue on and just ignore your body's incapability, right? And using your mental game to push you past those barriers. And, you know, he keeps using examples of Jordan. He says, after every game, I used to ask Michael one question, 5, 6, or 7, as in what time we hitting the gym tomorrow morning? And he'd snap back a time, and that was it, especially after a loss when there wasn't a whole lot else to say. No discussion, no debate, no lame attempt to convince me he needed the morning off. You good? I'm good. See you in the morning. So, like, you know, that's an elite athlete right there, right? Just ready to take on that next task. And he's focused on that game. He's focused on performing in that game, but he wants championships, right? So all those games are adding up and he's focused on the next one. He's working out the next morning, win or loss. And is anybody else going to be there? No. And that's when you know you're doing something right. Yeah. So now going on to the next chapter. The title is When You're a Cleaner, You Don't Have to Love the Work, but You're Addicted to the Results. And the intro is, cooler makes you wish you paid him less. A closer asks how much and then decides how hard he'll work. A cleaner doesn't think about the money. He just does the work and knows you'll be grateful for the privilege of paying him. Finally, the big day. Perfect knot in your $200 tie. Mom has a new dress. The whole family is by your side. Someone suddenly whispers in your ear, this is it. The commissioner is at the podium. With the 11th pick, you don't hear anything else. The first person to hug you is your agent. Congratulations. Today is the beginning of the end of your career. Did you exhale? Did you think, I'm finally here, set for life? Or did you think, I have a lot of work to do? Most guys on the day they're drafted go out to celebrate. Kobe went to the gym to practice. I just love that. I love that line. That just fired me up, because that's just the way you have to think, right? There's no celebration in not being where you want to be, right? Like Kobe getting drafted was a stepping stone for him, right? He had bigger plans. And this is that kind of reaching for the stars and landing on the moon type situation. A lot of people, they're thinking that they're capable of less than they actually are. So most of these guys, they get drafted and they're like, oh, I did it. My lifetime goal of getting drafted. But like Kobe's goal from the start was to probably win an NBA championship, since he started playing. And it's Grover goes on and he talks about the hate that he's taken. And he says, whenever other people in my business want to rip me, they say, sure, the guy started with Michael Jordan. It's not hard to train the best. If you think it's not hard to take the best and find ways to make him even better, you've never had to face that challenge. It's easy to improve on mediocrity, not so easy to improve on excellence. And I don't know if it's this chapter or the last chapter, but he talks about Kobe's routine and how he works on the little details for the first 25 to 30% of his workout.
It was like wrist, ankles, and something else.
And knees
fingers.
or fingers. Yeah. And there's actually a story in here about Kobe's finger. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, I'm going to try and find that. But, and that's funny that Grover mentions that, because it is kind of crazy that he did start with Michael Jordan. This is his first client, which is just insane to think about. But he's right? Like it's easy to, and it's the same thing with being in shape. Okay. So you starting out, you're 300 pounds obese. It's going to be easy to lose 20 pounds. Right. But when you're lean and, you're packed on with muscle, it's going to be harder to gain that extra 5 pounds of, pure muscle, right? It's much harder. Yeah. So he goes on and he talks about, and he mentions a few times in here, cleaner laws. So this one is, when you reduce your competition to whining that you got lucky, you're doing something right.
I like that one.
Yeah, I know. I like that one too. And he talks about people saying good luck. And I think he mentions this in the last chapter as well, or the last episode, I should say. He goes on and he says, when the game is on the line, you don't want to hear good luck. It suggests you're not prepared. When you're headed to a job interview, you don't need luck. You need to know you're prepared and in control. And that's true. I mean, a lot of people get caught in that. I've been there before plenty of times where I'm like, I just need a bounce. Like I need some luck here, but it's just not true, right? You create your own luck. And regardless of, there are times that you feel like $1 million and you're like, wow, I'm going to perform this game. And, you'll come out and lay an egg or something like that. It shit happens. Right. And, it's all about kind of coming back from that and just owning that mistake and moving on from it. It's hard to do and it's hard to accept. But it has to be done, right, in order to reach that goal. Let's see where we're going here. So towards the end of this chapter, he talks about showing up no matter what. And there's another cleaner law that he mentions that I will get to, but I'm going to go back to the book here. He says, be professional. That's the one thing I admired so much about Michael when he was going through the grief of his father's death. He came back and did what he had to do at an even higher level. Dwayne, going through an ugly divorce and uglier custody battle, still showed up every day like a professional he is. Cleaner law. When you're going through a world of pain, you never hide. You show up to work ready to go. You face adversity and your critics and those who judge you. You step into the zone and perform at that top level when everyone is expecting you to falter. That's being professional. Neglecting your body and your skill, not professional. Every year I'll talk to a frustrated GM or agent about some young player who's trashing his entire future because he can't get this right. Instead of investing time and resources refining his skills and improving his conditioning so he can make it in the league, he's telling everyone it's too expensive and exhausting to train all summer and he needs the off season to relax. He's driving a $150,000 car, wearing a 10-pound diamond watch and a gold chain around his neck like a boa constrictor, and he won't spend 10 grand to guarantee he continues to make 10 million. Sorry, there's no off season when you're serious about being a winner. But hey, you can enjoy that off season permanently when you're cut by the team. Do the work. There is no privilege greater than the pressure to excel, and no greater reward than earning the respect and fear of others who can only stand in awe of your results. And that actually, it's comical to me too, right? Seeing these athletes and a lot of athletes who you look at and you're like, you're a professional athlete, right? They're not spending the money on themselves to kind of keep them there, keep them at that level, if not get better.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to touch on, because we kind of have a similar situation and can relate to it from this past chapter, was about the labor dispute and the season being delayed.
Yep.
Okay. So the season, again, like, I guess this is my own ignorance. When does the NBA season typically start?
Colin?
I think it's late September.
Late September. Okay. So Christmas is when the season started. So that's like, a couple solid months. And talks about how guys, this is the NBA. These are the best basketball players in the world. This season started, guys got hurt because they didn't train. They were out of shape. It looked sloppy. They didn't have their legs. They needed time to find their shot. And then he talks about how Jordan and Kobe, or I think it's specifically Kobe, was playing in this season.
Yeah.
And would train, took advantage of this. And that's exactly how I felt with COVID last year. Season ended, in this case, instead of starting late, it ended early. So we had an extended off season. And I'm sure some guys were like, oh, nice, a longer break.
Remember we were talking
I know. We literally came back from Alaska, Joe, and we're like, this is our chance. We have an extra 3 months on everybody else. We need to go, we need to start training right away.
Because we knew nobody else would start.
Right this away, is when you could get that advantage on everybody. Exactly. And it's just it's crazy that even at the NBA, you think you would be full of guys like that who are like, okay, I need to keep training. Now I have an extra couple months to perfect, this and this before we get into the season. Instead, they come in out of shape. It's unbelievable.
I know.
Real quick, just wanted to fact check that. It's late October. No, not late September.
October. Okay. But even still, it's 2 full months.
Yeah,
right.
And
exactly.
I bet you, and he's right when he says people probably took a breath and they're like, oh, finally I can rest even longer now, right? Give my
which
body
is unbelievable.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Mine's going if that happened, it'd be oh, perfect. I have more time to get get in better shape, get stronger, make my shot, pinpoint it down.
Yep.
It's crazy. You don't go I'm not going, oh, good, I can rest more. Yep. I hate that. That's the worst.
I know. And so the guys that do this, right, and they're prepared constantly, they're ready to go, and they're using that extra time to better themselves, they're feared by others. And that's what the next chapter is about. And we'll make this quick because this episode's extending pretty long.
Joey, can I just say one thing real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Going back to what Grover said here, just about this basketball player. And he was talking about, driving a $150,000 car, wearing a huge diamond watch, gold chain, and won't spend money on his body. You can't be motivated by money, whether it's sports, whether it's business.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are truly the best in their fields are not motivated by money. I immediately think of Elon Musk, right? Made $180 million on PayPal and then spent all $180 million in a SpaceX and Tesla, and
had to borrow money for rent.
Had to borrow money for rent. Exactly. And now look at him, right? I mean, most people look at $180 million. You're retiring the rest of your life and you're set. But he wasn't motivated by money. He wants to change the world. And the money is a byproduct of that. And no matter what your field is, whether it's sports, again, whether it's business, whatever it is, it cannot be money that motivates you. You have to want to change the world for the better. And money is a byproduct of that.
Well, you know what's going to happen is he's going to change the world and he's going to get paid for it. You know what I mean? So the money follows whatever you do. If you're the best at it, you're going to get paid for it.
All the richest guys, Bezos, Musk, all those guys.
Yep. And so going back to this whole fear factor thing, there's a story about Jordan that I'm going to read right after this, but he has another little intro here. He says, a cooler is liked, a closer is respected, a cleaner is feared, and then respected for doing exactly what everyone feared he'd do. And yeah, it's the truth, right? And then he goes on and he gives a perfect example about Jordan, his pregame mind games that he'd play with the other team.
Yeah, that's insane. Again, I
Yeah.
think that's a distraction. But like,
Yeah. Oh yeah, but and it's all part of his game plan though. So I'm gonna go on and read here, and he has a little thing about Michael Phelps here as well. So I'm gonna read that too. Back to the book. I'm sure most people respect swimmer Michael Phelps for all the medals. I respect him more for his ability to let those medals do the talking. While other swimmers were promising to knock him off the podium and take all the gold, he said nothing in response, never showed what he was thinking. When he got off to a slow start and people started to wonder if he was done, he pulled even farther back into himself, remembered why he was there, and crushed the rest of the events. And that's how you intimidate your opponents without saying a single word. And now this is where that legendary picture comes in, where I forget the guy's name, but he was like neck and neck with Phelps. And it shows him
the
like
guy's looking over.
it shows him looking over at him, and Phelps is just zoned in, right? He's looking straight
Losers
ahead.
focus on, I think the caption's always losers focus on winners, winners focus on winning.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, don't be that guy. You don't want to be remembered for something like that, because that's all he's going to be remembered for, you know?
Yeah.
And
there's also another famous picture with Phelps. So that one of him winning, but him on the other side, not in that exact situation, but this picture after he won, he's taking a picture with this little kid. And the guy's like, Michael Jordan's his idol. Well, then however many years later, 12 years later, the kid beat Phelps, got the gold, and Phelps got silver. And there's a picture of him again. And it was like,
yeah.
Don't stop grinding, whatever it was. Don't stop working until your idols become your rivals. He just beat Michael Phelps. And, 10 years ago, he was taking a picture with him as a kid.
That's insane.
It's crazy.
It's absolutely insane. All right. I'm going to read this Jordan intimidation technique here. Michael Jordan had the best intimidation technique I've ever seen. You can't do this anymore. But before certain playoff games, he'd walk into the opponent's locker room on the pretense he had a pal on the other side, and he had to say hello. Now, if you really knew him, you knew that was completely ridiculous, because Michael didn't care about saying hello to anyone, especially before a game. But try telling that to guys in the other locker room getting ready to play. The whole team would be sitting there thinking about facing the world champion Chicago Bulls, and in walks Michael Jordan. I don't care how long any of them had been in the game. When Michael Jordan walked in, you'd notice. He'd open that door, and the whole place would suddenly go completely silent. Everyone and everything just stopped. You could see every pair of eyes following him, watching, wondering, waiting to see what he was going to do. He'd only stay a minute, just long enough for a brief handshake with whomever he knew or pretended to know, a quick nod around the room, and he'd leave as quickly as he'd arrive. The black cat, we called him, there and gone before you knew what had happened. He wouldn't give it another thought, but for the stunned players sitting in that locker room, they could think of nothing else. Mission accomplished. He'd gone into their space and lodged himself in their heads for the entire game. Now they're no longer thinking about what they have to do. They're thinking about him. Instead of clearing their minds and getting to that cool, focused performance zone, their minds are heating up over number 23. He's got the entire other team talking to each other about how many points the great Michael Jordan will score that night, how many he'd score the night before, the suit he was wearing, the automobile he drove. They were no longer his opponents. They were just a bunch of fans in awe. So now, Dylan, I do understand what you're saying about how that is a distraction, because I definitely wouldn't do something like that.
But at first look, you think it's an influence or a distraction, but it, like he said, it doesn't bother him. That's the last he thinks of it.
Yep, absolutely.
But pretty crazy. That's bold.
I know. And so another legendary person who would have this fear factor is Tiger Woods. And I'm going to read this example as well. But I mean, Tiger Woods, talk about fear factor, man. Imagine playing with that guy. Imagine playing against him, having a crowd like that following him around, and Tiger's just standing there. Everybody knows that look that Tiger has, right? It's just there's not there. I don't even think he could hear people around him. That's how focused that he looked. And he does mention again about the whole scandal situation that he had, and how all of a sudden people weren't afraid. People weren't feared by him anymore,
Yeah.
I'm going to read this right now. Back to the book. Cleaners always leave behind a taste of the fear factor to give their next victim something to think about, so everyone knows they're coming. That's the undeniable edge they give themselves. That was one of Tiger's greatest weapons, knowing the rest of the field was looking back to see what he was doing, waiting for him to make his move. Every tournament, every round, every hole were all about him. The only thing anyone, including the competition, wanted to know was, what did Tiger do? But when he was struck down by scandal and injury, his game deteriorated. The competition stopped worrying about him. He no longer commanded the fear and respect that had made him an unstoppable force. Everyone else's skills didn't just suddenly improve, but their mental focus did. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously, right? Like, and he kind of let that get to him. Obviously, I'd love to hear what Grover has to think about him now, especially considering he came back. That's probably the greatest comeback of all time. I'm also curious. He doesn't talk about any athletes in other sports, but he mentions Tiger a lot. So I wonder if he actually worked with Tiger at a certain point.
I don't know. Maybe he did. That's why he came back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Maybe
Right.
that'd be interesting. But yeah. So then we go back into the whole topic on dressing professionally and all that stuff. So we pretty much covered all the bases here for these pages. My ultimate takeaway for this is the whole decision making. Right? You have to make your decision, and usually it's your gut instinct that is the correct decision in the path that you should ultimately follow.
Right. Just one thing I'd add on to that real quick is just when you make a decision too, you just don't second guess it. You know, even if you make a decision and it ends up being the wrong decision, make sure you're making that decision 100 miles an hour and you're going all in on it, you know?
Yeah.
Because you hear coaches talk about that a lot, and it's important that once you make that decision, it's plan A or nothing. You can't have a plan B, or that's going to create hesitancy. And then from there, it's going to be a lot harder to succeed.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Dylan, you got anything?
Oh, I think we covered it all today.
Perfect. All right. Well, hopefully we can get this in-person podcast going soon. But for now, we're sticking to this, and we've been getting great feedback from listeners and people who follow us. So, and we're loving this, right? This is good stuff, and we're excited for the next book. That'll be released soon because we're almost done with this. Actually, we probably only have an episode or two left. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for listening, everybody.